The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. In case you don't know, this is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors and journalists of all sort who write about the Bronx. And in our second segment today, we're going to be talking about a beautiful, wonderful photographic exhibit, and I probably should make that plural, exhibits that are going to be in our borough of the Bronx with one of the best photographic organizations in the Bronx. But to start the program, I am thrilled because I think she is the cat's meow. She's a tremendous reporter. She is actually the digital editor and a reporter for the Bronx Times. It is my pleasure to welcome Aliya Schneider to the program. Nice to have you, Aliya.
Thanks for having me.
You know, as you know, it's been a long desire of mine to have you on because you write such good stuff. But we use this program to let people meet the people who write in the borough of the Bronx. So, who are you? Where are you from? How did you get into journalism? What inspires you? Let's just do a little background of you so people can say, "Oh, that's Aliya."
Okay, so I'm actually from Vermont. My parents were both from New York City. I have family here, and I always kind of had a desire to be here. And I think I knew I'd end up working in the city. I How did I get into journalism? I started out kind of freelancing at local papers in Vermont. I'm class of 2020. I went to Barnard College. And so I was sent home to finish my senior year, and that's where I started freelancing for local papers. And then I ended up working at a daily paper about 2 hours upstate in Hudson, New York, and covering the city of Hudson as well as Columbia County. And then I worked a little bit in Westchester while freelancing for the Bronx Times. That was kind of last summer until coming on full time in November.
Mhm. So what inspires you? What made you say, you know, I like this idea of reporting news or writing about news? Was there a light bulb that hit? Was it something you always wanted to do? Were you a good writer originally? What got the juices flowing, so to speak?
So I've always loved writing. I've always been very curious. I like being in the know, very nosy, as a lot of journalists are, and I enjoy telling stories. But I actually, it took a while for me to put two and two together that reporting was kind of the thing for me. I was really interested in photojournalism when I was a college student. At Barnard, we didn't have a journalism major, but I majored in urban studies with a concentration in political science, which
Hmm.
finding very relevant in my day-to-day at the Bronx Times. And I did take classes at the Columbia J School, the Graduate School of Journalism, which I learned a lot
Ah.
and I loved it. But I really thought I wanted to be a photojournalist. And then actually when COVID hit and I was freelancing, I started out doing photography because I would do that already during my college breaks when I would go home for the local papers. And then I realized I'm doing a lot of writing. I was writing a thesis for school for urban studies. I love
And
researching.
and so then you just said, you know what, I ought to put this together and do it for real,
Yeah,
right?
so I just
Yeah.
started doing both, and I was
You,
like, reporting's a lot. I mean, I love photography, but I just found reporting to be so much more fun, like putting the pieces of a puzzle
Right.
together.
We interview, as you know, we interview a lot of journalists, a lot of young journalists, and you get the details right, and you look for details. And I just love reading. I hope people are reading the Bronx Times. I love reading what Aliya writes. She writes some of the most important stories in the borough of the Bronx. Let's get to a couple of those. This whole notion of rezoning in Community Board 10 on for a project on Bruckner Boulevard has, you know, lit a fire under the entire community because there are people who say, hey, we need housing. And then on the other hand, there are others who say, you know what, we don't want this in our neighborhood. We were zoned earlier that these things wouldn't happen, and so they're saying you can't do this to us. Let's answer that question of the headline. Where are we at with this proposal to turn a supermarket into housing and kind of a different kind of project?
Yeah, so I think that there's a sense of victory from the residents who don't want this to go through, because the community board really adamantly opposed it. There was one member who kind of very quietly was not against it. And the council member, Marjorie Velasquez, she has stated multiple times that she's against it, but there's still a lot left in the process. The borough president has a hearing and she gives a recommendation. There's a city planning process, there's ultimately the city council process, and then the mayor has the ultimate say in the end. So there's still other hurdles to go through. And I'm really interested to see, if the developers are going to tweak their proposal, or if, the city council is going to go against the local council member when
Right.
typically, the local council members' opinion weighs pretty heavily, but the developers haven't given up.
But yeah, and also that it does happen. I mean, I know that in the Northwest Bronx there was a filtration plant built over the objection of at that time Oliver Capel, and that was an example of a movement to make it happen. Plus, the mayor has come out supporting rezonings, and that would one would think begin to play somewhere in there. So there is more to go. I tell you the one thing, and I told you I was going to surprise you a little bit. The one thing that bothers me directly is that Councilmember Velasquez did not attend the community board meeting that you wrote about because she said she had received threats of violence. I got to tell you, this to me this is an absolute outrage. It is criminal to, threaten a council member. I'm sorry that she didn't, do it, but she didn't attend that meeting. I just think it's a complete outrage. I think there should be an investigation to find out who made those threats, and that should never happen. And I don't care how fraught the issue is, but you can't threaten a council member from attending a meeting and saying if you show up. That made me angry. I don't know if you don't even have to comment on it. That's Gary's comment. I just think that is absolutely unacceptable, and we can have good dialogue, but we don't need that. And whoever did it was wrong, and there should be an investigation to ferret that out. That's Gary's point. If you want
People
to
have
comment, you can.
Well, I will say that, despite the council member saying time and time again that she does not support this proposal, people have been very critical of her. At the meeting that photo is from, which was the community board meeting before the one she had the threats, she gave a speech, and some people were kind of nitpicking what she said. Nitpicking is the word that the council member used when she was talking about this afterwards. And they felt like she wasn't being specifically against it enough. She was kind of
Right,
trying to make a positive turn and saying, "What would you want here instead?" And people didn't really want to talk about that. They
right.
were just really angry about the project. So she's definitely faced a lot of criticism, despite, she will say to the press, she'll say over and over again, "I don't support this." So,
This
yeah.
This is why you're a journalist and I'm just a loudmouth talk show host. I told you what I think, but you gave us a very proper background. Her objections, as reported by Aliya Schneider in the Bronx Times, are that she thinks that if you're going to build housing and build a community, you need more money for other infrastructures like schools and health facilities and all those other things. She didn't come out and say, "I'm against rezoning." And that I think is what the issue was. So we'll see what happens. I know you'll be following it step by step, and everybody will read it from you in the Bronx Times. I will. And so we appreciate your work on that. The other thing that came up that you have written about is Legionnaire's disease. Now, and the fact that we've had cases of Legionnaires in the Bronx again. I remember that we had them in the past. There's the story that you wrote back at the beginning of this month about a Legionnaire's problem. What is frustrating to me about that is that we had it in the Bronx. One would think all the cooling towers were already inspected, and apparently they weren't. So, just what's your thought about it? I guess the second part of it is then Verizon was then sued because, their cooling towers were not inspected. So just give us a little background about that, if you would.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of this more recent legislation from about 2015 requiring these inspections and requiring kind of like registering these cooling towers was in response to an outbreak in the Bronx. And now we're seeing another one. So I'm really interested in looking
That's
at
right.
like, well, if I think of the Twin Parks Northwest fire and how there's all this legislation responding to it. And it's like, well, if this didn't work for this issue, are we going to see this in other issues? So we're really
Very good point.
eyes
Yeah.
on this moving forward and looking at, how did this happen when there was this legislation in response to a past outbreak? And now we have
This
it again.
Yes, this is basically what I was alluding to, is that we had the problem. One would think after that, we would have inspected all the cooling towers. Historically, I mean, this goes back to before you were a reporter here, but historically, we've never had enough inspectors working for, the housing department in the city, and so violations would just flourish. And unfortunately, it happened in this case. Um, we just have a moment or two left. Aliya, this is a. I'm sorry to stick you with it. What are you working on? What's good? What can we look at? And one of the reasons that we haven't been able to get her here is because she's always busy. So I know you're working on stuff. Is there something you want to give us a tip that we ought to be looking at and looking for in the Bronx Times?
Well, I think as more information comes out about the Legionnaires outbreak, we're really on top of that. They're investigating that right now, and we really have our eyes peeled about, why this happened, and we're just trying to get more information. But I honestly have this giant spreadsheet of all these stories that I'm working on and I want to do. There's just so many stories in the Bronx. And as you know, I wear two hats at the Bronx Times. I don't just report, I also help with social media and managing the website. I help Chris with editing. So I'm kind of all over the place. But there's a lot coming, that's for sure.
I wish you would leak that document to me, but I guess I can't get that. That's okay. That spreadsheet. That's what I'm looking for to
Oh,
find out find out what's actually going on. And as regards that, the Bronx Times people, I get a daily email. I think you're doing. We've got about 30 seconds. Tell me a little bit about. Is that difficult? Do you enjoy doing that? And because the materials the Bronx Times is putting out, as I said to you privately and have said publicly, are fantastic.
yeah, I mean, we're a really small team with really big ambitions, and I think that we're doing great, kind of reaching some of our goals, and we just have a lot more, and we have high aspirations, and it's exciting to be a part of.
Aliya Schneider from the Bronx Times, thank you so much. Say hello to all my buddies over there. We appreciate everything that you do. I can't speak for everybody else. I'm a big fan, and I hope that you keep telling us what's going on, because we don't know and we need you.
Thanks so much.
Great. All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Gary will change hats and or put on a hat, and we'll talk to the folks from En Foco, which is one of the best photography organizations in this borough of the Bronx. So the Bronx Buzz will be back right after this. All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am very excited about this particular segment. I've long been a champion of En Foco and the work that they do with photographers in our beautiful borough of the Bronx. And so we've got two people who are involved in one of a few exhibits that are coming to a borough near you. And so let's say good evening to the exhibitions and program manager of En Foco. It is Oscar Rivera. Nice to have you with us, Oscar.
Hi,
Uh,
nice to be.
Nice to see you. And a photographer extraordinaire, and it is Adeline Lulo. Nice to have you with us, Adeline.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
Uh,
Thank you so much.
Oscar, let's. You're the curator of Reflejos. Let's talk about Reflejos. What was the theme, and what did you put together?
Yeah, so Reflejos is sort of a double-edged sword. So it is an opportunity for us to reflect on some of the past winners of our fellowship program, as Adeline and Erica both won a couple years ago.
All right, we should mention that Adeline Lulo and Erica Morillo are the two photographers involved.
Gotcha.
Okay. I just want to give credit where credit is due. Go ahead.
So let's run that back. I don't know where I started.
Just keep going. You're good.
So Adeline Lulo and Erica Morillo were both winners of the photography fellowship. And we figured that as we're introducing our 2022 cohort after a couple of not so fun years, it would be great to re-engage with some of our past artists. But we also noticed a rising trend in the demographics of the Bronx, and decided that this would be a really beautiful opportunity to engage more with our Dominican community. And this show touches on a few different aspects of what diasporic life in the Dominican Republic can be like. And the show is focused on the narratives presented by female photographers working within their communities, their families, and how they're engaging with those themes in two very different ways.
What are those two ways? You know, I'm not letting you off the hook.
Oh, of course not. Adeline, who's here, felt that it was her duty to document her community, work with her people, really capture the resilience of her community, whereas Erica is more of a reflective approach. She's examining her lineage, her family's direct cultural history, and using that to inform how she is setting up life for her children and her life beyond.
So last question for you, and then we're going to let Adeline talk about her craft and her work. Was it a case of you saying, hey, we ought to do this? Or was it a case of them saying, hey, we've got all these photos, maybe you could put a show around it? You know, which came first, the chicken or the egg, I guess is what I'm asking. Or a combination, I guess.
So a combination. These series were exhibited both when Adeline and Erica had won originally, I think in 2016 and 2017. And since then, the world has changed. Things are a little different now.
Of course.
So we figured that we would revisit them, introduce these works to new communities, and give them another shot in the spotlight to really celebrate their works and their communities.
Adeline, when you have this charge and you're supposed to do this, you take your camera out. How do you just go at random and say, let's see what I find? Or do you plan? And by the way, we're going to show some of these wonderful photographs. Or do you plan what you're going to do?
Well, my photography project, Si Dios Quiere, that is being featured in the exhibition this Saturday. I started that in 2013 in the Dominican Republic, and it was a way for me to reconnect with my motherland and my family and my friends in the Dominican Republic. So from a very young age, I was obsessed with photography. Like, I loved the camera. I loved having images in my hands. Like, I grew up with my mom documenting my childhood both in New York and in the Dominican Republic.
So you really, just to move it ahead, you really had some of these concepts already and had done them. Did you add, we're going to show these in a moment, did you add other work based on what you had, or is this really a retrospective of things you had already done?
This is a retrospective. So the Si Dios Quiere, it spanned from 2013 to 2017. I would go for a month and document. So the way that it started was just me. I bought a flight and I was like, I'm going back to the Dominican Republic. I was absent for 13 years because once I was eligible to work in New York, I stopped visiting because I wanted to be able to provide for myself.
What I wanted, I want before I don't want to run out of time because I want to show some of these photos. We're going to run through them too quickly, and the beauty of it is it's going to be too quick. So therefore, beginning June 11th, all the way through July 13th, you're going to be able to go and see them and spend time and really look at the photos. So Anderson Peguero, our producer, what do you got? Show us something really cool. All right. Who wants to talk about this? I guess Adeline, that's for you, right?
Yeah. So this photo was taken on my grandfather's land, his plantation field, and it's really it reminds me of him. He passed away, and he used to say, like, every day he wanted to work on the field. Like, that was his dream. That was exactly how he spent his last
So
days.
even though it's an incredible photo, it has very personal meaning for you.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's get another picture. I want to show as many of these as we can. This is I love, our producer loved the last one. I love this one. But go ahead. What is this?
This is a family friend's home in Moca, in the Campo, in Dominican Republic, and every little Jesus image that's there, that's actually someone that passed away in her life.
Oh.
She, it's a very interesting image because if you look very closely, you also see spoons hanging on the wall, and that's how she's holding the netting for the bed to prevent mosquitoes from biting her.
All right, keep it going. Let's see. Keep it going.
Oh,
I actually love this one too. I love all these. Go ahead. So who is this? What is this?
This image was while we were at the beach one day. We were in Samaná, and I always took my camera everywhere. So when we were leaving, I saw this little boy, and he had these beautiful flowers in his hands, and he was trying to give them out to get some tips, like to make a living in DR. And so when I saw him, I just was so in awe by how beautiful he was, and I wanted to do something good for him as well. So as Dominicans, every time we go to the beach, we always have spaghetti, like, in a pot.
Oh, really? That I did not know. Okay.
So when we left, we had leftover food, and I told my mom, I was like, I asked her, do we have any food that we can give him? So we ended up feeding him and a few of his friends, and it was just a special moment and interaction.
All right, keep going. I believe me, I could ask you a lot more about it, but I want to see these. I want everybody to see the pictures. I love the red. Go ahead, Anderson, throw up another. I love the red. Oh, this is speaking of the beach.
These are by Erica Morillo.
Okay.
And these images are how she rationalizes her upbringing and the ideal world that she wants to create for her son, who's now a little bit older. These were first exhibited, I think, in 2017. And now looking back, they've changed a little bit because her son is older. Her dynamic as a mother is different. And they've informed some of her other work where she uses some of the similar approaches and explores her relationship to other members of her family.
Wow. Oscar, let's talk a little bit about En Foco in general. Is this, I know that this is the sort of thing that happens all the time. This is why En Foco exists. But talk a little bit about the modern day. You were talking about the fact that, we've had 2 years of people not really doing what they used to do. I have a feeling that a lot of photographers were still taking pictures. So it gives you a wealth of material to use. Talk to me just in general about what your work is about.
Well, so just a little context. En Foco started in 1974 by a group of Puerto Rican photographers who were really responding to a lack of opportunity and resources for other Puerto Rican photographers, and then since then has grown to encompass artists of all colors. And so, believe it or not, these last 2 years have been some of the busiest for En Foco. We did not stop any of our programs. We transitioned.
You don't mind if I applaud for that, because that, well, also Bronx artists, man, we I say we because I'm an artist in my own way. We just got to keep going, and during that time when everybody was going wild in their own homes, got to take them pictures.
Yeah, so we did a few different things. Since then, we had a pandemic response forum where we invited artists in the community to talk a little bit about what their experience in the pandemic was. They were featured in our magazine, Nueva Luz. We've had a recent traveling exhibition that featured some of the fellowship artists, including Erica Morillo, that traveled through the SUNY system and visited SUNY Stony Brook, Fredonia, Binghamton, and New Paltz that came down at the end of 2021. So we've been doing a lot of things in the last couple of years.
Well, it's just fantastic. Adeline, when's the first time you took a camera in your hand and you said, you know what, I think I want to do this more often? Like, I like this.
I think I was probably like 7 years old, and
Really?
I convinced my mom to buy me a Polaroid camera. I still have it to this day. It's a Barbie Polaroid camera, and yeah, ever since then, I was always obsessed with cameras since I was a kid, and I always knew I was going to be an artist, and I always wanted to be one. But just being the daughter of immigrant parents, that wasn't like something that was highly motivated. Like, you can do arts, but like do it as a hobby, not as a career.
What you have just expressed is what En Foco is about. And that is to take the incredible work of Bronx artists, Bronx photographers, and give them a chance. And so I'm going to ask you a stupid question. How important is En Foco for you and for other photographers? Stupid question of the day.
En Foco is an amazing, wonderful resource. Like, I'm so happy I discovered them. Right after I graduated Parsons, I applied for their fellowship, and I had my first group exhibition aside from my thesis exhibition with school. So because of En Foco, I got to exhibit my work in NYU and meet other artists.
And here we are today. Listen, I want to just promote everything. So let's see. The Reflejos is June 11th to July 13th. By appointment only. You send an email to info@enfoco.org. And it is at 413 East 140th Street in Mott Haven at the Romanesque Revival Row House Gallery. I also want to talk about my dear friend Marisol Diaz-Gordon, who has Night Vision. Also debuts June 11th. The opening reception is June 11th from 3 to 6 at Woolworks, New York, on the fire escapes at the Bronx Create Hub, which is another invention here in the Bronx, and we've got to have it, and that's why we have it at 15 Canal Place, which is a very funky neighborhood in our borough. And then also the reveal, the 2022 En Foco Fellowship exhibition also begins June 11th. Opening reception at the same time, Saturday, June 11th at 3 o'clock at that same place, 15 Canal Place in Mott Haven. I got to do this. Javier Alvarez, Daniel Aros Aguilar, Dennis Redmoon Darkeem, Carlos Esquera, Paola Martinez Fitere, Diana Guerra, Carmen Zardo, Jahiz Sabater, Cynthia Santos Briones, and Nyasia Sylvester. Just wanted to give them a shout out. We got to run. Oscar Rivera and Adeline, thank you so much. We'll see you around. That's all for the Bronx Buzz. Good night.